What if the history you're taught in school was missing an entire civilization? Not a small tribe, not a forgotten kingdom, but an empire so vast it stretched across continents. Its cities rivaled Rome. Its technology brushed against the futuristic. And yet today, many people have never even heard of its name. That civilization is called Tartaria. You won't find it in your history textbook. You won't hear about it in your college lecture halls. But old maps show it sprawled across Eurasia, and fragments of its architecture still rise in our cities today. The theory claims it was erased, buried beneath mud, hidden by elites, and stolen by those who came after. For decades, the whispers of Tartaria floated on the fringes of history. But recently, the internet has breathed new life into the story, sparking debates and conspiracies that have millions asking, was Tartaria real? And if so, why was it buried? Buckle up, because once you start looking for Tartaria, you'll see it everywhere. Imagine opening a 17th century map of the world. Across the top of Asia, where Siberia stretches endlessly toward the Arctic, you see a bold name, Tartary. Not a small province, not a forgotten borderland, an empire sprawling across thousands of miles. To explorers of the time, this was Great Tartary, and it rivaled the great civilizations of Europe in scale. Believers described Tartary as more than a political boundary. It was a unified empire. Its cities were filled with ornate architecture that rivaled the best of Paris and Rome. Vast, star-shaped fortresses dotted its lands. Not just defensive structures, but some say they might be energy hubs, capable of channeling natural forces. To its people, it was not the fringe of the known world. It was the center of it. But Tartaria didn't just dominate land. It supposedly held secrets of technology far beyond its age. Legends claimed its cities were powered by free energy harnessed from the atmosphere. Its towers and domes weren't just decorative, they were receivers, pulling energy from the very ether. If true, this would have been a civilization centuries ahead of its time, a lost precursor to our own modern technology. And here's where the story takes a weird turn. Because if Tartaria was truly this advanced, why is it missing from mainstream history? Why does the name only survive on maps and in scattered accounts? The theory suggests a deliberate erasure, carried out by the powers that rose after Tartaria fell. There's even a story often retold in Tartarian circles of an archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann, the man who found Troy. He supposedly stumbled upon strange ruins in Siberia, foundations too massive for the nomadic tribes known to history, and believed he had uncovered Tartaria itself. Whether true or not, it adds a shiver of authenticity. Look around the world today, and Tartaria believers say fingerprints still remain. Take a walk through St. Petersburg. Look at the Winter Palace, the sprawling boulevards, the domed cathedrals. Now glance across the ocean to San Francisco, Chicago, or even Washington, D.C. Why do buildings half a world apart look so similar? To Tartaria theorists, the answer is simple. These buildings weren't created by 18th and 19th century societies. They were inherited. When Tartaria supposedly fell, its architecture was absorbed by the nations that claimed its land. Governments, churches, and elites took over these grand structures and passed them off as their own creations, rewriting the plaques, the histories, and the credit. Consider the star forts. Found in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, these geometric fortresses share a strange design. Perfect starbursts carved into the earth, symmetrical and mathematical. To the mainstream, they are brilliant examples of modern military engineering, but Tartaria believers argue their placement and precision hint at something else. Structures designed to harness or direct energy, remnants of a technology we no longer understand. And then there's the world fairs of the 19th century. Take Chicago, 1893, the Columbian Exposition. Photos show a sprawling white city of domes, towers, and palaces illuminated with electric light, supposedly built in just 2 years, and dismantled right after. This feels impossible. To believers, these weren't temporary plaster facades. They were remnants of Tartaria, showcased one last time before being erased. But perhaps the most haunting evidence lies not above ground, but below. Photos of old cities show windows and doors buried in the ground. Buildings appear to sink into the earth. Believers say this is the aftermath of the mud flood, a cataclysm that wiped Tartaria from the surface, leaving only its upper floors visible to us today. The theory goes like this. Sometime in the 18th or 19th century, a global disaster struck. It wasn't a flood of water, it was a flood of mud. Entire cities were buried overnight. Streets rose by entire stories. Populations were destroyed or displaced. And when the mud settled, Tartaria was gone. The evidence, believers argue, is everywhere. Walk through old European cities and count how many ground floors sit beneath the current street level. Look at photos of grand government buildings whose windows are strangely half hidden. Cities like Chicago show signs of this inexplicable burial. This was no isolated event, it was worldwide. And after the mud flood, the Great Reset began. Surviving elites stepped in, took control of empty cities, and rewrote history. They claimed the architecture as their own, redrafted maps, and erased the name Tartaria. In its place, they built the world we know today. One where history is neatly packaged and taught, but with a massive hole at its center. To believers, this explains why so many 19th century photos show cities almost too empty. Eerily quiet, as if populations had been lost. It explains why ornate architecture appears in frontier towns where it doesn't belong. It explains the silence of history books when it comes to Tartaria. The Great Reset wasn't just a catastrophe, it was a cover-up. And perhaps the strangest part? The mud flood isn't unique to Tartaria lore. Across cultures, there are myths of floods, cataclysms, and earth-swallowing events. Could Tartaria have been the most recent chapter of an age-old cycle? An ancient civilization destroyed and buried just as Atlantis was said to be drowned? Why does Tartaria captivate so many? Part of it is the sheer drama, and it's a fun story. We love stories of hidden civilizations. Atlantis, El Dorado, Lemuria. Tartaria is different because it doesn't live under the sea or in a mythical past. It hides in plain sight, in our cities and under our feet. Another reason is distrust. In an age when people doubt governments, corporations, and even scientists, the idea of a hidden history feels plausible. If they lie about small things, why not lie about the biggest things of them all? The past itself. Tartaria offers the ultimate conspiracy. Not just stolen money or power, but stolen time, stolen heritage, and stolen identity. And the visuals are irresistible. A photo of a half-buried building says more than paragraphs of explanation. A star fort viewed from above seems like a coded message left for us to decipher. The architecture itself becomes a character in the story. Silent, monumental, and defiant against erasure. Then there's the forbidden technology. Imagine if Tartaria really had wireless energy, architecture that harnessed natural forces, and a society organized around abundance instead of scarcity. Believing in Tartaria is not just believing in a past, it's hoping for a possible future. Finally, there's the internet. Tartaria thrives online because it's an open source mythology. Anyone can contribute. A new photo, a new interpretation, a new clue, even this video. The myth grows with each retelling, evolving like folklore, spreading faster than any single historian could debunk. But now, we reach the critical question of, did Tartaria actually exist? Historians argue that Tartary on old maps wasn't an empire, but a vague term Europeans used for poorly understood regions in Eurasia. The people living there weren't unified under one flag, they were Turkish tribes, Mongol states, and scattered kingdoms. The name was a label of ignorance, not an ancient civilization, so they say. One of the real archaeological finds that sometimes gets folded into Tartaria lore is the Tartaria tablets. Discovered in 1961 in Romania by archaeologist Nicolae Lassa, they are clay tablets of symbols tied to Vinca culture. Some think they might be a form of proto-writing, though that is highly controversial. Because their dating, context, and meaning are disputed, some fringe theorists incorporate them as part of the Tartarian foundational narrative, claiming they are relics from a deeper, obscured civilization. But in academic circles, they are generally seen as artifacts of Southeastern European Neolithic culture, not proof of a global erased empire. Star forts were military designs born of gunpowder warfare, spread across Europe and the colonies in the 16th century. The ornate domes and palaces of the 18th and 19th centuries were products of the industrial power, colonial wealth, and revivalist styles, not Tartarian legacies, so they say. And those buried windows? Urban regrading. Chicago literally razed its streets in the 1850s, and Seattle rebuilt one story higher after a devastating fire. No mud flood required, so they say. As for the Great Reset, there's no geological evidence of a global mud flood in the 1800s. No worldwide sediment layer. No catastrophic accounts in the newspapers of the time. Instead, the mud flood narrative seems like a retroactive myth built from the scattered anomalies, woven together in a grand story. And yet, all that doesn't make it meaningless. Because even if Tartaria wasn't real, the story taps into something universal. The belief that our past isn't complete, that mysteries remain, that history is still alive and waiting to be uncovered. In a world that feels very much known, Tartaria keeps the door of wonder open. So, was Tartaria real? An erased empire hidden beneath mud and lies? Or is it just a modern myth, born of old maps, misunderstood photos, and our need for mystery? The evidence does kind of lean toward myth. But the fascination, that's real. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Tartaria's power isn't in whether it existed, but in how it forces us to question, to look harder, and to never settle for the easy answer. What do you think? Do you think Tartaria is real in some sort of capacity? Maybe an ancient civilization wasn't around in the 1800s, but around longer than that. Drop your theories down below in the comments, I'd love to hear them, and as always, leave a like down below and subscribe for more content. And as always guys, stay curious.